The morning sun barely pushed through the clouds as 14-year-old Zora Matthews stood at the bus stop, clutching her backpack straps so tight her knuckles turned pale. Today was her first day at Westridge Academy, and her stomach felt like it was tied in knots. The bus that would take her across town to the fancy part of the city was late, making her even more nervous. "You're going to do great," her grandmother had told her that morning, fixing the collar of Zora's only button-up shirt. "Remember who you are. Remember where you come from." But standing here now, Zora wasn't sure if remembering where she came from was a good thing. The scholarship letter had arrived 3 months ago, shocking both her and Grandma Rose. A full ride to Westridge Academy, the school where rich kids went, the school with its own concert hall and art studio. The school where nobody looked like her. When the bus finally came, Zora sat alone, watching her neighborhood fade away, replaced by bigger houses and cleaner streets. By the time the bus stopped in front of Westridge Academy, her palms were sweaty. The school looked like something from a movie, all brick and ivy with perfectly trimmed bushes. Students poured out of expensive cars, wearing clothes that probably cost more than Zora's entire wardrobe. A group of girls walked by, laughing about their summer trips to Europe. Boys with expensive watches checked their phones, not bothering to look up as Zora passed. She pulled out her schedule. First class. Music with Mr. Harrington, room 108. She took a deep breath and walked through the main doors. Inside, the school smelled like linen polish and new books. The floors shined so much Zora could almost see her reflection. Pictures of former students hung on the walls. Doctors, lawyers, politicians, all smiling down at her as if to say, "You don't belong here." A tall boy bumped into her shoulder as he passed. "Watch it," he muttered without looking back. Zora mumbled an apology even though it wasn't her fault. Finding room 108 took longer than it should have. The school was like a maze, with hallways that all looked the same. By the time she found the right door, the bell had already rung. Taking a deep breath, she pushed it open. 20 pairs of eyes turned to stare at her. At the front of the room stood a man who could only be Mr. Harrington. Tall and thin with silver hair and glasses that sat low on his nose, he looked at Zora like she was something unpleasant that had just crawled in. "You're late," he said, his voice sharp and cold. "I'm sorry, sir. I got lost." Zora's voice came out smaller than she wanted. "Name?" He looked down at his clipboard, frowning. "Zora Matthews." His eyebrows went up just a little. "Ah, the scholarship student." The way he said scholarship made it sound like a dirty word. Someone in the back of the room snickered. "Take a seat, Ms. Matthews. Try not to disrupt my class any further." The only empty seat was near the back, next to a window. Zora walked down the aisle, feeling everyone's eyes follow her. Her second-hand shoes squeaked against the polished floor, sounding impossibly loud in the quiet room. As she sat down, she noticed the centerpiece of the room, a beautiful grand piano, its black surface gleaming under the lights. Zora's fingers twitched instinctively. At home, she practiced on an old keyboard Grandma had found at a yard sale 5 years ago. The keys were yellowed and some of them stuck, but Zora loved it more than anything. Mr. Harrington turned to the whiteboard. "As I was saying before we were interrupted, the Winter Showcase is our most important event of the fall semester. All students are required to perform. Parents, board members, and donors will be attending." He turned back to the class, his eyes settling on Zora. "Even our newest additions will be expected to demonstrate their talents." More snickers. Zora sank lower in her seat, wishing she could disappear. Through the window, she could see the bus that had dropped her off pulling away. Part of her wanted to run after it, go back home where she belonged. But then she remembered what Grandma Rose said that morning as she fixed Zora's lunch. "Your great-grandfather had magic in his fingers when he played." They wouldn't let him into the fancy concert halls back then, but that didn't stop his music from being beautiful. That same magic is in you. Don't you forget it. Zora straightened her back and opened her notebook. She might not belong here yet, but she wasn't going to let them see her break. Not today. Not ever. The next 2 weeks at Westridge Academy felt like walking on eggshells for Zora. Every morning, she'd get up before sunrise, put on her cleanest clothes, and catch the bus across town. Every afternoon, she'd come home tired from trying to be invisible and perfect at the same time. Mr. Harrington's music class quickly became the hour she dreaded most. While other teachers ignored her, he seemed to enjoy pointing out her differences. He'd call on her when her hand wasn't raised, or make little comments about the different standards at her old school. On a rainy Tuesday, Zora arrived early to music class, hoping to avoid another comment about her tardiness. The classroom was empty except for the grand piano sitting in the center like a sleeping giant. Zora glanced at the door, then at the piano. Her fingers itched to touch those perfect ivory keys, so different from her worn-out keyboard at home. Before she could stop herself, she slid onto the bench and placed her hands gently on the keys. She didn't press down, just felt their cool smoothness under her fingertips. This close, she could smell the polish used on the wood, could see her faint reflection in the glossy black surface. "What do you think you're doing?" Zora jumped up as if burned. Mr. Harrington stood in the doorway, his thin lips pressed into an even thinner line. "I'm sorry, sir, I wasn't. That instrument is worth more than your entire neighborhood, Ms. Matthews. It's not a toy for just anyone to touch." Heat rushed to Zora's face. She backed away from the piano, bumping into a music stand and sending sheet music fluttering to the floor. "I'm sorry," she repeated, dropping to her knees to gather the scattered papers. Her hands shook as she tried to put them back in order. By now, other students were filing in, watching the scene with curious eyes. A girl with straight blonde hair whispered something to her friend, and they both laughed behind their hands. "Leave it," Mr. Harrington snapped. "Just take your seat before you cause more damage." Zora practically ran to her desk, keeping her eyes fixed on the floor. The whispers followed her like a trail of smoke. That day, Mr. Harrington announced they would begin preparing for the winter showcase. "Each of you will perform a piece that demonstrates your musical abilities," he explained, pacing in front of the whiteboard. "Or lack thereof," he added, his eyes flickering toward Zora for just a moment. A boy with perfectly combed hair raised his hand. "Will we be graded on our performance?" "Of course, Mr. Chen. The winter showcase accounts for 40% of your final grade. It's an opportunity to show what you've learned, and more importantly, to represent Westridge Academy to our community." Mr. Harrington adjusted his glasses. "I expect nothing less than excellence." Zora's stomach dropped. 40%. If she failed this, she could lose her scholarship. And losing her scholarship meant going back to her old school, facing everyone who'd told her she wouldn't last a month at Westridge. After class, a girl named Lily stopped by Zora's desk. She wasn't as fancy as some of the others. Her clothes were nice but not designer nice, and she usually sat alone at lunch too. "Hey," Lily said, fidgeting with the strap of her backpack. "Don't worry too much about old Harrington. He's always extra hard on new students." Zora looked up, surprised that anyone would talk to her. "Does he always make them feel like they don't belong?" Lily shrugged. "Pretty much. Last year, he made a boy cry during his showcase performance." She lowered her voice. "But between you and me, I think he's just bitter because he never made it as a real musician. My brother says he tried to play with the symphony but wasn't good enough." For the first time in 2 weeks, Zora felt herself smile a little. "Thanks. What instrument do you play?" Lily asked as they walked out of the classroom. "Piano. Well, keyboard really. My grandma found one at a yard sale years ago." "Cool. I play violin, but I'm not very good. My parents make me take lessons." They walked together down the hallway, and for a moment, Westridge didn't feel quite so cold. But the next day, everything changed. Mr. Harrington decided to do a skills assessment to see where everyone stood before the showcase preparations began. One by one, students performed pieces they'd prepared. Some were amazing, years of expensive private lessons showing in their confident performances. Others were decent but nervous. Mr. Harrington critiqued each one harshly, but at least he acknowledged they had some talent to work with. Just when Zora thought she might escape notice, he called her name. "Ms. Matthews, your turn." Zora froze. "I didn't know we needed to prepare something for today. I sent an email to all parents last week." His smile was thin. "Perhaps your household doesn't check emails regularly." More snickers from around the room. Zora felt her cheeks burn. "No matter," Mr. Harrington continued. "Show us what you can do. Anything at all." He gestured toward the piano with a sweeping hand. Unless, of course, you don't play anything. The room fell silent, all eyes on Zora. This was her chance to either sink or swim. With legs that felt like jelly, she stood up and walked to the piano. As she sat down, she could feel Mr. Harrington hovering nearby, waiting for her to embarrass herself. Zora closed her eyes. In her mind, she wasn't at Westridge anymore. She was home, sitting at her old keyboard while Grandma Rose hummed along from the kitchen. She was playing for the memory of her great-grandfather, who never got the chance to perform on a piano this fine. Taking a deep breath, Zora placed her hands on the keys and began to play. The first notes came out shaky. Zora's fingers trembled slightly as they pressed into the smooth ivory keys. She could feel everyone watching her, waiting for her to mess up. Mr. Harrington stood just a few feet away with his arms crossed and a smug look on his face. But then something happened. The piano's rich sound filled the room, so much fuller and more beautiful than her old keyboard at home. It was like finding water after being thirsty for days. Zora let her fingers remember the piece she'd practiced hundreds of times in her bedroom, Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major. She had taught herself this piece by watching videos online, rewinding and replaying until her fingers could find the notes in her sleep. On nights when Grandma worked late shifts at the hospital, Zora would stay up past midnight, practicing with headphones plugged into her keyboard so she wouldn't disturb the neighbors in their thin-walled apartment. As she played, the classroom faded away. The snickering stopped. Someone gasped softly. Zora didn't notice. She was lost in the music now, her fingers dancing across the keys with growing confidence. The melody soared and dipped, her left hand providing the gentle pulse of the bass notes, while her right hand wove the delicate melody above. When she reached the middle section, where the music grows more complex, she didn't hesitate. Her hands moved with the muscle memory of countless hours of practice. She added her own subtle touches. A slight lingering on certain notes, a gentle emphasis that wasn't written in the original score but felt right to her. Mr. Harrington's smug smile had vanished. His mouth hung slightly open, his eyebrows raised almost to his hairline. He had clearly expected her to fumble through Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star at best. Instead, he was hearing a piece performed with technical skill that many of his advanced students couldn't match. But it wasn't just the technique. There was something in the way Zora played. A depth of feeling, a soulfulness that made the familiar piece sound new. Several students had performed classical pieces that day, playing every note correctly but without heart. Zora played like each note mattered. As she approached the final section, she opened her eyes briefly and caught a glimpse of Lavi's face. Eyes wide with wonder, a huge smile spreading across her features. It gave Zora a burst of confidence. She closed her eyes again and poured everything into the final passage, her fingers moving faster, the dynamics swelling then softening as the piece came to its gentle conclusion. The final notes hung in the air for a moment, then faded to silence. Complete silence. No one moved. No one whispered. Zora sat still, hands resting lightly on the keys, almost afraid to look up. Then the applause started, hesitant at first, then growing louder. Lily was on her feet, clapping wildly. Most of the class joined in, some looking surprised at themselves for doing so. A few students in the back, the ones who had laughed the loudest at Mr. Harrington's jokes about Zora, sat with their arms folded, but even they couldn't hide the shock on their faces. Zora finally looked up at Mr. Harrington. His face had gone through several changes in the past few minutes, from smugness to surprise to disbelief. Now it settled on something harder to read. His mouth was a tight line again, but not in the same dismissive way as before. He looked confused, as if the world had suddenly stopped making sense to him. "Where did you learn to play like that?" he asked. His voice was quieter now, the mocking tone gone. Zora straightened her back. "I taught myself. We couldn't afford lessons." Another wave of whispers swept through the classroom, but different this time, impressed rather than mocking. "You taught yourself Chopin?" Mr. Harrington's voice was flat with disbelief. Zora nodded. "My grandmother found some old music books at a thrift store, and I watched tutorials online." Mr. Harrington's eyebrows drew together. He opened his mouth as if to say something, then closed it again. The bell rang, saving him from having to respond. "Class dismissed," he muttered, turning away quickly. Students began gathering their things, many of them glancing at Zora with new interest. Lily bounded over, practically jumping with excitement. That was amazing. Why didn't you tell me you could play like that? Zora shrugged, still a bit dazed by what had just happened. I didn't think anyone would care. Are you kidding? You're like the best pianist in the class. Even better than Thomas, and he's been taking lessons since he was 4. Lily grabbed Zora's arm. Come on, let's go to lunch. You have to tell me everything about how you learned to play. As they walked out, Zora glanced back. Mr. Harrington was still standing by the piano, staring at the keys where her fingers had been. He looked up, caught her eye, and quickly looked away. Something had shifted. Zora could feel it. For the first time since coming to Westridge, she walked with her head up, her shoulders back. She still didn't quite belong, not yet, but she had found her voice. Or rather, her music had spoken for her. That night, when Grandma Rose asked how school was, Zora smiled and said, Actually, something pretty good happened today. Grandma's eyebrows shot up in surprise. Well now, that's a change. Tell me everything. As Zora described the music class, her grandmother's eyes filled with tears. Your great-grandfather would be so proud, she whispered. So proud. Zora went to bed that night feeling lighter than she had in weeks. But as she drifted off to sleep, a small worry crept in. What would happen tomorrow? Would Mr. Harrington be even harder on her now? Or would things be different? She would find out soon enough. The next morning, Zora walked into Westridge Academy with a strange mix of hope and worried churning in her stomach. Would yesterday change anything? Or would it make things worse? The answer came sooner than she expected. In the hallway before first period, a tall boy with curly hair stopped her. Hey, you're the piano girl, right? From Harrington's class? Zora nodded cautiously. That was pretty cool what you did yesterday. I'm Alex, by the way. I play cello. He smiled and continued down the hall, leaving Zora standing there, surprised. Similar moments happened throughout the morning. A nod from a girl who had previously ignored her. A desk saved for her in English class. Small things, but they felt huge after weeks of being invisible. By the time music class rolled around, Zora had almost convinced herself that things might actually be okay. Then she walked through the door and saw Mr. Harrington's face. He didn't look angry exactly, more like determined. He barely acknowledged Zora as she took her seat, but she could feel his eyes following her. Today, he announced once everyone had settled, we begin serious preparation for the winter showcase. I've assigned pieces based on your skill levels. He held up a stack of sheet music. Some of you will find these challenging. Others may find them insufficiently advanced. His eyes flicked to Zora for just a second. One by one, students came up to receive their assigned pieces. Some looked pleased, others worried. When it was Zora's turn, Mr. Harrington handed her a thin booklet. Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 3, he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. First movement. The classroom went quiet. Even Zora, with her limited formal music education, knew that Rachmaninoff's Third Concerto was notoriously difficult. One of the most challenging pieces in the classical piano repertoire. Professional pianists spent months, even years, perfecting it. Sir, she began. I don't think. You demonstrated exceptional talent yesterday, Ms. Matthews. Mr. Harrington cut her off. Surely you're not backing away from a challenge. His voice was smooth, but his eyes were hard. This wasn't a compliment, it was a trap. Give her something impossible, watch her fail, prove that yesterday was just a fluke. I'll try, Zora said quietly, taking the music back to her desk. Lily leaned over. That's not fair. Nobody gets Rachmaninoff for their first showcase. He's setting you up. I know, Zora whispered back. After class, Mr. Harrington called her to stay behind. The room emptied until it was just the two of them. Ms. Matthews, he began, straightening papers on his desk. Yesterday was unexpected. Zora stayed silent, clutching the Rachmaninoff score. In my 20 years teaching at Westridge, I've never encountered a self-taught student with your level of natural ability. He looked up at her, his face unreadable. It's unusual. Thank you, sir. It wasn't a compliment, he said quickly, merely an observation. He stood up and walked to the piano, running his fingers lightly over the keys where Zora had played yesterday. This piece I've assigned you is beyond your current abilities, he said bluntly. Without proper training, you won't be able to perform it adequately for the showcase. Zora's heart sank. Then why? Because he cut her off again. I've decided to offer you private instruction. Zora blinked, sure she had misheard. Private lessons. 3 afternoons a week, here after school, will begin today. He looked at her like he was offering her a prison sentence instead of an opportunity most Westridge students would fight for. Why? The question slipped out before Zora could stop it. Mr. Harrington's face tightened. Because talent without proper guidance is wasted, Ms. Matthews, and whatever else I may think about the scholarship program, I don't believe in wasting talent. He paused. Also, frankly, I don't want my reputation damaged by a poor performance at the showcase. It wasn't exactly kind, but it was honest. Zora thought about the bus schedule. If she stayed after school, she'd have to take the late bus home. Grandma would worry. I need to call my grandmother, she said. Mr. Harrington nodded stiffly. Use the phone in the office. Tell them I gave permission. An hour later, Zora sat at the grand piano with Mr. Harrington standing beside her, his expression severe as ever. Your technique is atrocious, he said as she played through a scale. Your fingers are too flat. Your wrists are too stiff. He demonstrated the proper form. Like this. Again. Zora tried again, adjusting her hands. Better, he admitted reluctantly. Now, the Rachmaninoff. First page only. Zora looked at the complicated score with its dense clusters of notes. Taking a deep breath, she began to play, stumbling almost immediately. Stop. Mr. Harrington shook his head. This is much harder than Chopin. You need to break it down. One measure at a time. He pointed to the first few notes. Again, just this part. For the next hour, they worked on just the first line of music. Mr. Harrington was demanding, critical, and occasionally harsh. But he was also thorough, precise, and, surprisingly, patient when Zora struggled with particularly difficult passages. Enough for today, he finally said, checking his watch. Practice this section tonight. We'll continue tomorrow. As Zora packed up her things, he added, There's a practice room in the music hall. Room 3. I've arranged for you to use it during lunch and free periods. Zora looked up in surprise. Practice rooms were usually reserved for seniors. Thank you, she said. Mr. Harrington nodded curtly. Don't waste my time, Ms. Matthews. If you're not willing to work harder than you've ever worked before, tell me now. Zora thought about her keyboard at home, about the hours she'd spent teaching herself, about her great-grandfather who never got the chances she was getting now. I'll work hard, she promised. You'll see. Something flickered across Mr. Harrington's face, not quite a smile, but perhaps the ghost of one. We'll see indeed, he said. On the late bus home, Zora stared out the window at the city passing by. Her fingers were sore, her head swimming with notes and instructions. Mr. Harrington was still strict, still cold, still not particularly kind. But he was teaching her, really teaching her. When she got home, Grandma Rose was waiting with dinner kept warm. How was your first lesson? She asked. Hard, Zora admitted. Mr. Harrington is tough. Grandma Rose nodded. The best teachers often are. They see what you can be, not just what you are. I don't think that's it, Zora said, remembering his comment about his reputation. I think he just doesn't want me to embarrass him. Maybe so, her grandmother replied, serving up a plate of food. But he's teaching you all the same. Sometimes life gives you the right things for the wrong reasons. That night, Zora practiced on her old keyboard until her fingers ached, playing the same measures over and over. The keys felt different after the grand piano at school, stiffer, smaller, less responsive. But they were hers, and they had gotten her this far. Tomorrow would be another day at Westridge. Another day of being the scholarship student, the outsider. But now she had something that made her belong, even if just a little bit. She had her music. And whether he meant to or not, Mr. Harrington was helping her make it better. The weeks flew by like pages in a flipped book. Every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, Zora stayed after school for lessons with Mr. Harrington. Every other spare moment, she practiced. During lunch in room 3, on her keyboard at home, even tapping her fingers against her desk during other classes, playing the notes in her mind. The Rachmaninoff piece was the hardest thing she'd ever tried to learn. Some days, she wanted to give up, to tell Mr. Harrington he'd been right all along. It was too difficult, but something kept her going. Maybe it was the memory of her great-grandfather or Grandma Rose's unwavering faith in her. Or maybe it was the tiny moments when Mr. Harrington would nod approvingly or say that passage was acceptable, which from him felt like high praise. One afternoon in early November, Zora arrived for her lesson to find Mr. Harrington talking to an older woman she didn't recognize. They both turned as she entered. "Miss Matthews, this is Mrs. Chen. She's the head of our music department." Mrs. Chen smiled warmly. "I've heard a lot about you, Zora. Mr. Harrington tells me you're working on Rachmaninoff." "Yes, ma'am," Zora replied, suddenly nervous. Was she in trouble somehow? "I'd love to hear some of it, if you don't mind," Mrs. Chen said, moving toward one of the chairs along the wall. Zora looked at Mr. Harrington, who gave a small nod. He hadn't told her there would be an audience today. Her hands felt clammy as she set her backpack down and took her place at the piano. From the beginning, Mr. Harrington instructed, his voice neutral. "And remember what we discussed about the tempo." Zora took a deep breath, placed her hands on the keys, and began to play. The opening chords flowed from her fingers with more confidence than she felt just a few weeks ago. When she reached the main theme, she lost herself in the music as she always did, forgetting about Mrs. Chen, about the showcase, about everything except the notes on the page and the sound filling the room. After she finished the section they'd been working on, Mrs. Chen applauded softly. "Remarkable," she said, looking at Mr. Harrington with raised eyebrows. "Truly remarkable." Mr. Harrington's face remained impassive, but Zora thought she detected a hint of pride in his eyes. "Ms. Matthews has been working diligently," he said, "though there's still much room for improvement." Mrs. Chen smiled. "Well, I have a proposition for you, Zora. The Winter Showcase traditionally features a student performing with our orchestra. I'd like that student to be you this year." Zora's mouth fell open. "With the whole orchestra?" "It's a great honor," Mr. Harrington added, "and a great responsibility. The entire school will be watching, not to mention parents, board members, and alumni." Zora's heart raced. The thought of playing in front of hundreds of people made her stomach flip. But Mrs. Chen was looking at her expectantly, and even Mr. Harrington seemed to be waiting for her answer with unusual interest. "I'd be honored," she finally said, her voice coming out steadier than she expected. "Excellent." Mrs. Chen stood. "I'll let the orchestra director know to prepare the accompaniment. They'll need to begin rehearsals with you soon." She turned to Mr. Harrington. "You've done remarkable work with her, Edward." After Mrs. Chen left, Zora looked at Mr. Harrington. "Did you recommend me for this?" He busied himself with some sheet music. "I mentioned your progress to Mrs. Chen." The decision was hers. He paused. "You realize what this means. The practice schedule will be even more demanding." "I can handle it," Zora said, though she wasn't entirely sure. Between school, practice, and now orchestra rehearsals, when would she sleep? "We'll see," Mr. Harrington replied. But there was something different in his voice, a hint of something almost like respect. Word spread quickly through Westridge that Zora Matthews, the scholarship student, would be the featured soloist at the Winter Showcase. Suddenly, people who had never spoken to her were stopping her in hallways, asking about the piece she was playing, telling her how cool it was. Lily was thrilled for her, but warned that not everyone was happy. "Thomas is super jealous," she whispered during lunch one day. "His parents have been paying for lessons since forever, and he thought the solo spot was going to be his." Sure enough, Thomas and his friends started giving Zora cold looks in the cafeteria. One day, someone stuck a note in her locker that just said "charity case" in block letters. Zora crumpled it up without showing anyone. The increased attention wasn't all bad, though. A girl named Ava invited Zora to her study group. Alex, the cello player, started saving her a seat on the late bus. Little by little, she was becoming part of Westridge, not just a visitor passing through. But the real surprise came 2 weeks before the showcase. Mr. Harrington kept her late after a particularly difficult rehearsal with the orchestra. "Your tempo was uneven in the middle section," he said, marking notes on his copy of the score. "And you're still rushing the arpeggios." Zora nodded tiredly. Her eyes burned from lack of sleep, and her shoulders ached from hunching over keyboards for hours each day. Mr. Harrington looked up, studying her face. "You're exhausted," he said, not unkindly. "I'm fine," Zora insisted. I just need to practice more. No, he said, surprising her. What you need is a better instrument to practice on at home. That toy keyboard isn't helping your technique. Zora bristled. It's not a toy, and it's all I have. Mr. Harrington sighed. Come with me. He led her down the empty hallway to a smaller practice room she'd never been in before. Inside was an upright piano, not as grand as the one in the classroom, but still a real piano, well-maintained and beautiful. This belonged to my mother, Mr. Harrington said quietly. I had it moved here years ago, but I rarely use it anymore. He ran his hand over the polished wood. I've arranged for it to be delivered to your home tomorrow. Zora stared at him, speechless. It's not a gift, he added quickly, seeing her expression. It's a loan, for practice purposes, just until the showcase. Mr. Harrington, I can't. You can, and you will, he said firmly. I will not have my student performing Rachmaninoff after practicing on a substandard instrument. He handed her a folder. Here's the rest of the orchestral score. Study it tonight. I want you to understand what every instrument is doing around you. As Zora took the folder, their eyes met. For the first time, she saw something in his face beyond sternness or cold assessment. She saw recognition, one musician seeing another. Thank you, she said softly. Mr. Harrington nodded once, then gestured toward the door. That's all for today. Get some rest. The next afternoon, the piano arrived at Zora's apartment. Grandma Rose cried when she saw it, running her fingers over the keys as if they were made of gold. Your great-grandfather would have given anything for an instrument like this, she whispered. That night, Zora played the Rachmaninoff piece on a real piano in her own home, her fingers flying across the keys with newfound confidence. It wasn't just the better instrument, though that certainly helped. It was knowing that Mr. Harrington, who had once looked at her with nothing but disdain, now believed in her talent enough to loan her something precious to him. The winter showcase was approaching fast. Zora still had so much to learn, so many hours of practice ahead. But for the first time, she truly believed she could do this. She belonged at that piano. She belonged at Westridge. And most surprisingly of all, Mr. Harrington seemed to think so too. Ava takes a deep breath and approaches Mr. Johnson after class. Her heart pounds in her chest, but she knows she must confront him about his unfair treatment. Mr. Johnson, she begins, her voice trembling slightly. I need to talk to you about what happened today. Mr. Johnson looks up from his desk, surprised by Ava's directness. Yes, Ava. What is it? He asks, trying to maintain a neutral tone. I know you didn't expect me to play well today, Ava says, looking him straight in the eye. And I think it's because of the color of my skin. You assumed I wouldn't be good at piano because I'm black. Mr. Johnson shifts uncomfortably in his seat. Ava, he starts, but she interrupts him. No, let me finish, she says, her voice growing stronger. What you did today was wrong. You singled me out and tried to humiliate me in front of the whole class, and I know I'm not the only student you've treated this way. Mr. Johnson's face reddens, and he looks down at his hands. I'm sorry, Ava, he says quietly. You're right. I let my own biases cloud my judgment. I shouldn't have assumed anything about your abilities based on your race. Ava nods, feeling a mix of relief and empowerment wash over her. I appreciate your apology, Mr. Johnson, but it's not enough. You need to do better. You need to treat all your students with respect, no matter what they look like or where they come from. Mr. Johnson takes a deep breath and meets Ava's gaze. You're right, he says. I've been teaching for a long time, and I've let some bad habits and attitudes take hold. But I want to change. I want to be a better teacher for all my students. Ava smiles, feeling a glimmer of hope. That's good to hear, Mr. Johnson, and I have an idea of how you can start. She tells him about her plan for a school-wide talent show, explaining how it could be an opportunity to celebrate the diverse talents and backgrounds of all the students. Mr. Johnson listens intently, nodding along as Ava speaks. I think that's a wonderful idea, Ava, he says when she's finished. I'd be happy to help in any way I can. Over the next few weeks, Ava and Mr. Johnson work together to organize the talent show. They reach out to students from all grades and backgrounds, encouraging them to share their unique skills and passions. As the day of the show approaches, the excitement in the school is palpable. Students buzz with anticipation, rehearsing their acts and cheering each other on. When the curtain finally rises on the night of the show, the auditorium is packed with students, teachers, and families. One by one, the performers take the stage, showcasing a dazzling array of talents, from singing and dancing to poetry and martial arts. As Ava watches from the wings, she feels a swell of pride and joy. She knows that this show is about more than just entertainment. It's about creating a sense of community and belonging, where everyone feels valued and appreciated for who they are. And when the final act takes their bow and the audience erupts in applause, Ava knows that her story has made a difference. She has shown that even in the face of prejudice and adversity, the power of talent and determination can bring people together and create something beautiful. The night of the talent show arrives, and the school auditorium is buzzing with excitement. Students, teachers, and parents fill the seats, eagerly awaiting the performances. Backstage, Ava takes a deep breath and peeks through the curtains. She sees a sea of faces, all coming together to celebrate the diverse talents of her fellow students. As the show begins, the audience is treated to a dazzling array of acts. A group of 6th graders performs a lively dance routine, their movements perfectly synchronized. A shy 8th grader takes the stage with her violin, captivating the crowd with a hauntingly beautiful melody. A pair of best friends brings the house down with a hilarious comedy skit. Throughout the night, Ava watches from the wings, her heart swelling with pride. She sees the joy on the faces of the performers, the way they light up as the audience cheers them on. She knows that this show is about more than just entertaining the crowd. It's about giving every student a chance to shine, to feel valued and appreciated for who they are. As the final act takes their bow, Ava steps out onto the stage. The audience falls silent, waiting to hear what she has to say. "Thank you all for coming tonight," she begins, her voice clear and strong. "This show has been a labor of love for all of us, and I'm so proud of every single performer who had the courage to share their talents with us." She takes a moment to look out at the crowd, making eye contact with as many people as she can. "But this show is about more than just talent," she continues. "It's about celebrating the diversity that makes our school so special. It's about recognizing that each and every one of us has something unique and valuable to offer, no matter what we look like or where we come from." As Ava speaks, she sees nods of agreement rippling through the audience. She sees tears in the eyes of some of her classmates, and she knows that her words are hitting home. "I hope that this show has inspired all of us to embrace our differences, to treat each other with kindness and respect, and to never let anyone make us feel like we don't belong," she says, her voice wavering with emotion. As she finishes her speech, the auditorium erupts in a standing ovation. Ava feels tears streaming down her face as she takes in the sight of her classmates, her teachers, and her community, all united in their appreciation for the beauty of diversity. In the days and weeks that follow, Ava sees a change in her school. Students who once kept to themselves start to reach out to each other, forming new friendships across grade levels and social groups. Teachers make a conscious effort to create more inclusive lesson plans, celebrating the unique perspectives and experiences of all their students. And Ava herself becomes a leader, a voice for change and acceptance. She starts a diversity club, where students can come together to share their stories and learn from each other. She speaks out against prejudice and discrimination, inspiring others to do the same. As she looks back on that fateful day in music class, Ava realizes that it was a turning point not just for her, but for her entire school community. By confronting Mr. Johnson and organizing the talent show, she had sparked a conversation about the importance of embracing diversity and treating everyone with respect. And in doing so, she had helped to create a more welcoming and inclusive environment for all. Ava knows that there is still work to be done, that prejudice and discrimination won't disappear overnight. But she also knows that change is possible, that every small act of courage and kindness can make a difference. And as she looks to the future, she feels a sense of hope and determination, knowing that she will continue to use her voice and her talents to make the world a little bit brighter, one day at a time.